ginger and black pepper in a mead. This is a special, unique version of my ginger black pepper mead recipe, sessionable and fizzy. The idea was good, but the execution left a little bit to be desired. So I'm going to show you what I did, what went right, and what we could have done better. And this is the mead. My ginger black pepper mead recipe is one of my favorite things I've come up with. It's right up there with my house IPA as one of the things that I try to keep in the pipeline at all times and try to have on hand, and available to drink all the time. But this isn't a video about that recipe. It's about this mead right here in the glass. We'll do a video on that recipe another time, and I'll tell you what it is and why it's so awesome. This one is a special and unique iteration on that recipe, and it kind of came about in a kind of a different way. So the thing about mead is that it takes forever to be ready. When it first finishes fermenting, it kind of tastes like it's young, it's green, it's just not good. But give it 6 months, a year, 3 years, then it's awesome. And so the goal with this was to kind of brute force my way past all that with the low ABV and the carbonation. What happened was, last year, we finished off the last of this stuff, and I realized I screwed up. I didn't have any more in the pipeline, I didn't have any fermenting or aging or ready to go. And so I thought with this that we could maybe not have it ready in like a couple of weeks, but maybe a couple of months. And suffice to say, that didn't work out. So I popped the keg back in the closet for a year to let it finish. And here we are a year later, finally drinking it. It's much better now, much closer to what it was supposed to be. It has its problems, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I don't think the idea was bad, but I think the execution could have been better. It definitely tastes like a ginger mead now. And for those of you who don't know me, and that's probably most of you at this point, I'm not a huge fan of like the sugary sodas, but I do like ginger ale and root beer. And with this recipe, I usually go for a lot more subtlety. Something more like a traditional mead, but with some complexity and depth and bite from the ginger and black pepper. With this though, since we were carbonating it, I thought, why don't we sort of target more of like a ginger ale flavor? So I amped up the ingredients. And it really worked out. It's got a lot of that ginger heat, and the black pepper kind of does what black pepper does, which is to say it spices it. And if that doesn't make sense to you, think about like a steak. When you use salt and pepper on a steak, in the final result, you don't really have something that tastes like salt and pepper. You have a steak, but it's spiced. And those spices, instead of showing up as, their own flavors, they just make those steak flavors pop more. And so that's what it does in this. Instead of creating a black pepper flavor, it just makes the ginger and the honey and the mead flavors pop. All right, so going back to brew day, I made about 2.5 gallons of this stuff to fit into a 3-gallon keg. I started by getting all my ingredients together. For this batch, I just threw in everything on day 1 during primary fermentation rather than secondary or aging. For my 2.5-gallon batch, I rough chopped about a 1/2 ounce of fresh ginger and about 5 grams of whole black peppercorns, not crushed or ground. To set up my mead, I poured about 70 ounces of honey into my Brew Demon fermenter. There's a QR code for you on screen if you want to get one of these yourself. I love these fermenters. Note here that my honey was crystallized. This isn't so much a big deal. It'll eventually mix in, it might just throw off your original gravity reading. But we know based on online calculators that 70 ounces of honey into a 2.5-gallon batch should turn into about an 8% mead. We just don't know the precise ABV. I'm also using cheap Amazon honey in this batch, which I think is a little bit more of a problem. We'll come back around and talk about this in a minute, but if you're making this at home, I strongly suggest getting you some real, good, high quality honey and not the cheap store-bought stuff. I then topped up the fermenter to 2.5 gallons using water and stirred it all together. Now, in goes our ginger and black pepper. Whenever you do additions, especially in primary, I strongly suggest using something like a hop sack to keep it all together. Finally, pitch your yeast. For this batch, I used Red Star champagne yeast. I can't tell you if that was the best choice or the worst choice. It's just what I had on hand. And finally, I added my yeast nutrient, which in my case was Fermento. With this being a low ABV session mead, I just front loaded it all and added all of the yeast nutrient at the start. Now it's ready. You just put it in a fermentation closet and let it ferment. I gave it about a month to ferment and finish up and rest a little bit, which I guess is more than I've done for some things, but it's still a pretty aggressive timeline for a mead. But because I didn't plan on aging it at all, I didn't give it time to settle out and clear up and, age. And I didn't rack it into a carboy or anything for a secondary or bulk aging process. I put it straight into the keg thinking, I was gonna drink it right away. And I did, and it didn't go well. At this point, it just tasted like a young mead, shocker. So the experiment was a complete failure in terms of what I was trying to do, which was skip the aging process. But don't let that stop you from doing this if it sounds interesting at all, because it eventually did get better. At the time though, right after kegging, it just tasted young. Plasticky and chemically and rubbery and acetaldehyde-y. Just all of the bad off flavors that you get in a young, green, unaged mead. I mean, I guess I could have drank it then, but I wouldn't have enjoyed it. So I just gave up on it at that point, took it back off the gas, and threw it back in the fermentation closet where I could just forget about it for a year. And you may be wondering now if that works. Can you take a pressurized keg of now warm mead that was once cold and has warmed up and let it age like that? And the answer is, why not? I mean, there's nothing about that would cause a problem, right? I could have left it in the keezer, but I was also thinking maybe let it warm up, let the yeast become more active so they can clean up after themselves and get rid of some of those bad off flavors, which is also an important part of resting and aging. But beyond that, the rest of the process is a lot like lagering, right? Or maybe something like if you ever made a wild saison or a Brett beer. And now I don't really have any experience with that, but from what I understand with those beers, a lot of the times you'll make them and then leave them on tap and they'll just sit and age, and you'll drink a beer here and drink a beer there, and it'll just get better and change over time. And I could have done that with this mead and just left it in the keezer and left it on tap and had some here and there. But honestly, I kind of wanted to save room in the keezer for other things. And a year later, it is so much better. It's a night and day difference. It's kind of insane. It tastes like a proper mead now. But now let's talk about what went wrong and what could have gone better. Like I said, this was a complete failure in terms of the experiment I was trying to do, but as a fizzy, sessionable mead, it turned out pretty good. The premise was sound at least. I think if I was gonna do this again, I should come at it with the idea of doing this mead, not trying to take shortcuts and circumvent things. I should have started with the plan to make a good mead, follow the processes step by step, do it right, let it sit and clear up and clean up, and then rack into a carboy and let it sit even longer for a bulk aging time. And then finally, at that point when it's ready, keg it and enjoy it. Yes, that would have been good. But here's another thing. This still isn't as good as it should be. It's cleaned up, it's mellowed, the flavors are working together, it's mostly good, the ginger, the honey, the black pepper that makes it pop. But there's one thing in there that's just not good. There's this like pine saw cleaning solution sort of flavor going on. It's not dominating, but it's there, and I'm not a fan. And I think probably that this is because of the Amazon honey. This isn't the first time I've gotten this. And I'm not gonna go too much into this rant, but I've learned fairly recently that the cheap honeys you get at the grocery store might not be what you think they are. Apparently, they're not even real honey. There's no rules, there's no regulations for what they can put on the label of a honey. Kind of like, that organic label thing. And so to save costs, they cut the product with something cheaper, kind of like hard drugs. And so what you could be getting when you go buy grocery store honey is almost guaranteed not to be honey. It can be anything from honey cut with sugar water to just corn syrup with honey flavoring. But it's almost guaranteed that it's not real honey, like 100% of the time. And my experience with this and other meads has kind of validated that. The meads that I've made more recently with real good, legit honey from a real good, legit honey supplier are consistently so much better. And I've never gotten this weird cleaning solution flavor from a mead with real honey. So if you're doing this at home, use real honey. You won't be disappointed. I know that's what I'm doing from now on. By the way, I've been using honey from Flying Bee Ranch. This isn't an affiliate thing. I'm not gonna tell you to go buy from them, so I can make a buck. I've just been using them and I like the product. It tastes good. It may not be the best thing out there. It may not be the worst thing out there. I honestly don't know. If you have a better suggestion for a good source of real high quality honey, let me know. But yeah, for this one, I think I'd go with like a more neutral honey, like a clover or a wildflower probably. I think you could get away with something with a bit of citrus, like an orange blossom, but don't go crazy on it. The ginger and the black pepper in this are what are supposed to be doing the heavy lifting. And you really don't want to mess with that. If you put too many flavors into it, it'll just collapse on itself and taste flat. But that's it. Other than that, bad experiment, but good mead overall. I'll definitely be doing this again, but better next time. And if you have any other thoughts, comments, suggestions, drop them in the comments below. And other than that, I'll see you in the next one.